I told y'all they was gonna cook the cream of wheat, man.
Now available in paperback and Kindle Unlimited. John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose. The man who rules the world runs into the irresistible force of a man with nothing to lose in this action-packed, all-new John Haynes series adventure. Get the regular and variant editions of John Haynes, the man with nothing to lose on Amazon.com today.
Better get the coleslaw, y'all, cause we're having us a barbecue. New York Mayor Eric Adams has been indicted on federal charges of bribery and corruption.
This is breaking news.
And this is a CBS News New York special report. Mayor Eric Adams has been indicted, and that indictment has just been unsealed, and we are combing through it now. These are some of the charges that the mayor is facing right now. There are 5 counts. Count 1, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, federal program bribery, and to receive campaign contributions by foreign nationals. Count 2 is wire fraud. Count 3, solicitation of a contribution by a foreign national. The other 2 counts are as such. Count 4, solicitation of a contribution by a foreign national, and count 5 is bribery.
These are the first criminal charges ever filed against a sitting mayor in New York City. It is a multi-count indictment, and it goes back many years. Decades of research and documents have been used in this indictment that was unsealed this morning in the Southern District Court. There are very specific charges here, one of them being that the U.S. attorney saying that he smuggled contributions through U.S.-based straw donors from several countries. One of them in particular is Turkey, and we've been following that for quite some time. The U.S. attorney also saying that he compounded his gains as well, and saying that this stemmed from years before he even ran for mayor.
Now, according to reports, New York Mayor Eric Adams was indicted by a federal grand jury on 5 federal charges, such as conspiracy to commit wire fraud for a federal program bribery and to receive campaign contributions by foreign nationals, and wire fraud and solicitation of a contribution by a foreign national. Now, all of these charges basically stem from investigations from the federal government as related to campaign finance contributions that Eric Adams allegedly received from straw donors connected to the Turkish government, and is also connected to his whole alleged involvement with trying to accelerate the opening of the Turkish embassy in New York. Now, this investigation has been going on ever since about 2014, ever since Eric Adams took the office of Brooklyn Borough President. And what's going on here basically proves a point that I made in my novel, The Temptation of John Haynes. Now, in that novel, The Temptation of John Haynes, I talk about always knowing the subtle politics transpiring around you. And sadly, Eric Adams wasn't looking around at the subtle politics transpiring around him as related to white supremacy. Now, when it comes to white supremacy always plays a game of chess. And in that game of chess with black people, they always rig the game to win. And they always pick people they can always get 7 to 8 steps in front of and be able to get the outcome that they want. And with Eric Adams, here was a guy who was basically caught up in his emotions about being considered a political darling of New York City. Unfortunately, this political darling of New York City couldn't see the chess game going on as related to his political career, and he couldn't see that game because he basically was one of these black males who loves to shuck and jive, and thought because he was getting the attention of white people that he basically was considered to be accepted by them. And as he was out here bootlicking and pandering to white people, he thought he basically had allies as related to white people in government, not understanding that he basically was in the presence of enemies who were basically waiting to take him out. And that's basically what was happening over the course of the last 10 years to Eric Adams, the former police officer who basically didn't have the critical thinking skills to see the big picture of the game because he was so caught up in his feelings about being seen as somebody who was getting praised by many of these white and non-blacks, as he thought that he basically was in with these people. And as he was out here bootlicking and pandering, he thought he basically was on his way up as being a top politician. Unfortunately, what he didn't understand is that there is a couple of axioms as related to white supremacy. One of those axioms is that white supremacy always loves to play cruel jokes on black people. And because they love to play cruel jokes on black people, again, they will basically go out here and gas a guy up, make him believe he's going somewhere. I go in depth on this in the novel The Temptation of John Haynes, because what the Lucifer character wants to do to John Haynes is play this kind of cruel joke on the John Haynes character. And as he's playing this joke, he makes him the CEO of the Morris Phillips Corporation. And the whole goal of him being that CEO was to set him up so that he could take his soul. And sadly, Eric Adams couldn't see the subtle politics transpiring around him. And because he couldn't see the subtle politics transpiring around him, he basically made compromises with the institution of white supremacy. And as he made those compromises with the institution of white supremacy, this black bootlick basically thought he was going to be in. And as he thought he was going to be in, he went out here running for mayor. And as he ran for mayor and won the election, he basically went out here bragging about how he's going to be the Biden of Brooklyn. But sadly, he couldn't see that he was going to be the punchline of a cruel joke. A cruel joke that was basically being set up as far back as 2014. Now, I began to see things going on as related to him being the mayor in 2021, of them looking to set him up for failure. Because I read a New York Times article basically saying people were looking at Eric Adams back in 2021 after he won the election. After he won the election, people were basically looking at Eric Adams and looking to investigate Eric Adams back then. And he basically was so caught up in his emotions about being coronated the first black mayor and caught up in the attention he was receiving that he couldn't see the bigger picture of what was going on as related to white supremacy. Because again, white supremacy, again, they play the long game as related to setting up the punchline for their joke. That is one axiom as presented here. Two, they basically, again, have another axiom that Professor Black Truth basically coins in many of his videos, and that is bootlick is a job without a retirement plan. And basically Eric Adams was making plans for his retirement by trying to get all of this political favor, but he couldn't really see the moves that were being made 7 steps ahead of him as related to this chess game, because he didn't understand the subtle politics transpiring around him. And because he didn't understand the subtle politics transpiring around him, he couldn't see that many of these same individuals in the institution of white supremacy were already planning his downfall, as he was basically out here looking to gain favor with those forces, looking to get favor with those forces. And as he was looking to get favor with those forces, they were basically plotting to take him out. And he couldn't really see it because, again, he was one of these black guys who was used to shucking and jiving and thinking these white people and these non-blacks think that he's cool. But the whole thing is they basically didn't see him as anybody they cared about. No, they basically saw him like I see him, as a modern version of George Jefferson, who basically is looking to chase them for their attention and approval, not seeing how he's giving them their power. And basically, as he's looking to do this, he's basically fitting into the caricature of the cream of wheat man. And that's where the cream of wheat man didn't see how they were basically putting him in a pot, similar to the way they basically go out here and cook a live frog. The cream of wheat man basically couldn't see they were making him into the cream of wheat, basically putting the pot on and basically letting it simmer. And as they let the pot simmer, he thought he was good, and basically sitting there relaxing inside of the political pot, thinking, going out here shaking hands, going out here rubbing elbows, thinking people were paying attention to him and thinking that he was in, but he couldn't see how they were basically slowly having this pot turn up the heat and slowly looking to go out here and boil the cream of wheat man. And that's where I always come up with the analogy saying, looks like the cream of wheat man finna be cooked, because that's basically what they were doing in their two-prong campaign to basically derail the whole term of Eric Adams. Basically, they were basically setting this dude up, setting him up, and having him thinking that he was being a guy on the way up the political ladder, but the only thing that they had planned for him was a political disaster, because what they wanted to do, again, long term, was set up this punchline of this cruel joke. A cruel joke because what white supremacy wants to do with Eric Adams is basically take this bootlick and make him an example to fit their idealized narrative as related to black people that has been presented in the classic racist movie Birth of a Nation. Now, in the movie Birth of a Nation, what white supremacists believe is that if you give a black person power, what that person will do is go out here and abuse that power. And because that person abuses that power, this is why they believe black people can't be trusted with power. And what white supremacy does to make sure that that turns into an axiom is what they do is go out here and recruit bootlicks like Eric Adams, that they can basically get in front of to get a desired outcome. And basically what they want to do is basically look to get that axiom proven to make their point, and basically make that point proven, because what they want to do is make it where people only look up to white politicians and trust white politicians instead of black politicians. And what they want to do is present the black politician as the face of incompetence. And sadly, what happened with Eric Adams is he basically was the perfect political pawn to fit that axiom, similar to his previous predecessor, David Dinkins. Now, David Dinkins in 1989 came out as the first black mayor of New York City, and as the first black mayor of New York City, he basically inherited a city that was completely dysfunctional from former three-term mayor Ed Koch, who had basically run the city into the ground and basically got it from Abe Beame and other mayors, and its city was a complete wreck. And these dysfunctional policies basically were in place, established by Abe Beame and Ed Koch and many others, but David Dinkins basically became the fall guy for all of those policies of those previous mayors. And as he became the fall guy for all those previous mayors' failed policies, basically David Dinkins became the man who everyone held responsible for the sad state of New York City as related to the crack epidemic and the crime. And part of that was due to David Dinkins' complete apathy of the lives of New Yorkers, because at the time the crack epidemic had made New York so untenable that people basically had to be in their homes at night. The city basically had crime running rampant all over the city, and you had over 2,200 murders, I believe, in 1991, and you had 2,000 murders the year before in 1990 as the crack epidemic raged on. And as the crack epidemic raged on, what happened is we had so many murders, again, that the city felt completely unsafe. And David Dinkins' indifference to the situation basically made it feel like that he didn't care, and made it feel like people didn't care, and basically made it where people didn't see him as the face of competence. And because he wasn't seen as the face of competence, what happened to David Dinkins was everything basically got out of control until a white person wound up getting killed, Brian Watkins, as related to he was making a trip to the U.S. Open, I believe, and he ran into these mob of teens as he was looking to go to Queens. And then what happened was, after Brian Watkins got killed, it basically alienated the black voting bloc as related to voting for David Dinkins, and basically made it where many of New Yorkers wanted to vote for Rudy Giuliani, who was established as the white savior by the institution of white supremacy, to basically prove the point that a black politician isn't competent at managing a crisis. And the same playbook was used on Lori Lightfoot just a few years ago to get her out of office, and right now that same playbook is in place as related to Eric Adams, who basically fell into this trap during the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Eric Adams, during the COVID-19 pandemic, basically thought he was so in with white people and non-black people, and so looking to gain favor with those groups over the black voting bloc, that he basically started to look to gain further favor with them in order to climb the social ladder. And as he looked to climb the social ladder, he basically wound up alienating most of the black voting bloc by continuing to keep the vaccine mandate in place established by Bill de Blasio, and looked to curry favor with Bill de Blasio and Andrew Cuomo and Kathy Hochul, the interim governor at the time, hoping to again get that political clout, and hope to get that political clout in order to further climb up the ladder and eventually wind up becoming what he called the Biden of Brooklyn. Unfortunately, what he didn't understand in the system of white supremacy, they don't want a black man to have the same power as a white man, and him calling himself the Biden of Brooklyn basically was Eric Adams caught up in his delusion, because again, in 2021, he couldn't see how they were basically setting him up the same way they were setting up David Dinkins to be the black person who winds up having to take the fall of a previous mayor who basically ran the city straight into the ground in Bill de Blasio. After 8 years of Bill de Blasio's incompetence, New York City went from being one of the greatest cities in the world, a place where basically people were looking to gentrify even places like the South Bronx, to a place nobody wants to come, all because of Bill de Blasio's far left policies that he supported, and him and Andrew Cuomo, such as bail reform and other policies. And Eric Adams, basically in his feelings about getting favor from these whites and non-blacks in politics, basically thought he could create a covert contract where he could go along with their policies, and they would basically cover all of his alleged indiscretions, and thought that he could use this to gain favor. And sadly, that whole plan, that covert contract, was never fulfilled, because when it comes to white supremacy, again, white supremacy doesn't make contracts with black people that benefit us. No, when it comes to black people, they saw you coming 7 steps ahead, and maybe even 25 steps ahead. In their political chess game, they've seen you coming for a while, and again, they never choose anyone except someone they can basically get in front of. And with Eric Adams, he was somebody they could get in front of, and because this bootlick was looking to again pander to whites and non-blacks in the system of white supremacy, he thought he was gaining favor by doing things like going out here and maintaining Bill de Blasio's dysfunctional policies, not understanding he was following the same playbook that David Dinkins followed as related to maintaining Ed Koch's dysfunctional policies. And as he maintained Bill de Blasio's dysfunctional policies, this was basically putting the city on a major state of decline. And like David Dinkins, what he wanted to do was say he was trying to clean things up, but the whole thing is he was holding on to those white people as a bootlick, looking to gain favor with them, looking to maintain their institutions, and that basically started the whole downfall of Eric Adams, deliberately designed by white supremacy on both the right and the left side. And sadly, Eric Adams basically played his hand as related to 2022, just 2 years into his term as mayor, when he got into it with Greg Abbott. And as he got into it with Greg Abbott as related to migrants, he basically went out here and brought the migrants up here, creating all of this chaos. And all of this chaos is basically because Eric Adams wanted to gain favor with whites and non-blacks. And again, what's happening to Eric Adams is this bootlick is getting a bootlick's reward. A bootlick's reward in that he was looking to gain favor with white folks and non-black folks and look to support the system of white supremacy, not seeing that white supremacy was basically waiting to yank the rug right out from under him, and had plans to do this as far back as 2014 because they just basically wanted to do this because they wanted to take away his political power, and take away his political power all because they basically were white and they said so. And again, when it came to Eric Adams, he couldn't see the subtle politics transpiring around him. He couldn't see how he was set up to be the punchline of this cruel joke, in that he was not being allowed to get this power based on merit. He was basically set up to be the punchline of that cruel joke because they could have got him in 2014. But I believe white supremacy waited an extended period of time because what their plan really was to basically prove that axiomatic point that these racists have. These racists have an axiomatic point where they want to prove that if you give a black person power, they will not be capable or competent to handle it. And Eric Adams basically was the perfect patsy and basically proved that point basically to the letter for the white supremacists that they presented in their movie Birth of a Nation, that if you gave a black person power, they would not be able to handle it, and they would basically be so corrupt that they would basically run a city straight into the ground. That is the point that the white supremacists wanted to make with Eric Adams, and as they looked to make that point, they played this political chess game with this guy and basically put him on a slow cook as related to looking to boil the frog. But what they wanted to do was boil the bootlick and basically make the bootlick believe that he had a chance, but he never had a chance at all because the game was rigged from minute one. And sadly, Eric Adams could not see this at all. But I, looking at the big picture, saw this coming way back in 2021. I saw this because this man was so caught up in his emotions about being the second black mayor that he couldn't take a look at the pattern that happened to the first black mayor, and that the whole pattern of this whole plan is basically one to make him look like the ultimate face of incompetence, so that people will be so traumatized that when they correlate incompetence, they'll see it with a black man, and if they ever see another black politician, they will never vote for another black politician. Because in 1993, when I was in college and David Dinkins was up for re-election, people were so traumatized by the crack epidemic and the crime that went on that was so rampant and the city being out of control, that they were so traumatized by the one term of David Dinkins that they basically wound up voting for Rudy Giuliani in large numbers in that election, and basically wound up taking the mayor's office away from the Blue Party for the first time in over about 24 years. And that happened because people were so traumatized because a black politician was considered the face of incompetence, and we didn't get another black candidate for 30 years. And what white supremacy wants to do is traumatize people to the point where when they see a black face as related to politics, they will not trust them. And we were not going to see another black mayor for another, I say, 60 to 100 years, because with Eric Adams, he basically was far worse than David Dinkins. David Dinkins' apathy was the thing that led to his downfall, but Eric Adams' greed basically was the thing that led to his ambitions to basically look to climb the ladder basically was the thing that white supremacy weaponized against him. weaponized against him because they could use his ambitions to try to make these impressions on higher up politicians to create a case against him, whether it be as related to this federal investigation of looking to gain clout with the Turkish government and gain influence with the Turkish government to build up his national political background, as related to either getting a job with the Biden administration or running for higher office like governor or senator or even president. They used his ambition against him and then used his whole ambition as related to looking to gain favor with the migrant crisis. Again, used all of this against this man, used it all against him, and then used it to create their case against you. Because again, when it comes to white supremacy, they basically size a guy up as related to his ambition and his greed and his emotions. These are the traits that they look for in people as related to getting ahead of them, and again basically use this against him. And as they use this against Eric Adams, he basically thought he was gaining favor, but he couldn't see how they were basically making him the punchline of the cruel joke of white supremacy. And as they looked to make him the punchline of that cruel joke, they wanted to create a tarnished legacy for Eric Adams, and sadly the cream of wheat man couldn't see the tarnishing of his legacy, the basic tarnishing of his reputation. He thought people were going to elevate him, but in white supremacy, they don't elevate black people. They try to find a way to tear black people down. And sadly, Eric Adams couldn't see the subtle politics transpiring around him. And as a result, sadly, he went out here and looked to go out here and sow these seeds as related to his political career that he thought were going to go up. He thought that the white supremacist was going to give him seeds that would bear fruit. But sadly, what happened to Eric Adams is he got a lot of seeds of thorns and briars from the white supremacist. And now, sadly, what is happening to Eric Adams is he's reaping what he sowed, greater than what he sowed, later than what he sowed, as related to his whole political career. He went out here looking to bootlick and pander, to white supremacy, and now he's reaping a bitter harvest as related to his career, reaping a bitter harvest because he put these thorns and briars into the ground. And I basically saw this as far back as 2021, even before that. With the entire election process, I said that Eric Adams was going to leave office in two ignominious ways. One, he would either leave office by being voted out of office, or two, he would leave from a federal indictment. And basically, 4 years later, my point is basically proven, because when it comes to black bootlicks, white supremacy has little use for them. And once they see that they've basically got their use out of a bootlick, they want to go out, unlike Professor Black Truth talks about, break the tool. They want to break the tool because they have no more use for the tool. And basically, Eric Adams basically outlived his usefulness. I believe even before this, they were going to get him even before he ran for mayor, but they wanted to wait and get him to get the maximum laughs for the punchline of this cruel joke, and basically prove their axiomatic point. And I'll keep repeating the axiomatic point. I know some people don't like it when I repeat, but I do this because I want to bring this point home. When it comes to black politicians, white supremacy, again, wants to always prove the point that a black person is incompetent. And I again present this whole point in my novel, The Temptation of John Haynes, because this devil basically wants to put you in a position of power to watch you fail. They set you up to fail, and they want to make you fail because their plan is to basically make it where they say they can passively say they gave a black person this election and put them in this position of power, but aggressively what they want to do is say this person failed, so that they can make this as the example of why we don't go out and hire black people or elect black people to power positions. This is the statement that white supremacy makes to, again, justify maintaining its power. This is the lie that they tell. It's a lie that they tell because they deliberately go out here and choose black people who they can basically get in front of, choose black people they can get in front of to basically reinforce and make this anti-black talking point one that is true. This is what they try to do with this whole plan as related to not only black politicians, but black executives, black managers, and even black employees. Many of these white supremacists, they don't want a system of merit. No, they don't want a system of merit where competent black people are allowed to rise. No, they go out here and get their own hand-picked bootlicks, their own hand-picked shills, their own hand-picked yes men, and they put these people up front. They put these people up front and have them as the face of black people. And as they go out here, bumble, stumble, and fail, what they do is set these people up for a road to prison or a road to an ignominious fashion where they go out, again, in a humiliating fashion. They set these people up to fail and, again, walk away from all of the competent, qualified black people who can actually do the job. Walk away from all the competent, qualified black people because they don't want those black people to be seen, because those black people would actually represent competition. They would actually represent actual competition. And again, the white supremacist wants a rigged game. And sadly, Eric Adams went and played this rigged game, sadly not understanding the chess that was going on, because he was holding up pink and red cards like playing a game of Candyland. And because he was playing Candyland, these chess players basically got up in front of him. And as they got up in front of him, they basically played a game that basically is making it where it's game over for Eric Adams at this point. Now, if you want to learn more about the subtle politics transpiring around black people, you can pick up my novel, The Temptation of John Haynes, and you can find that book in paperback and Kindle format on Amazon.com, and that book will basically show you the entire game of the subtle politics that goes around black people, and basically, with the John Haynes character, show you how John Haynes overcame this game that the devil was trying to play to take his soul and basically preserve your soul as you look to survive in this system of white supremacy. Now, I have other books in the SJS Direct universe that feature John Haynes, such as The Man Who Rules the World, and books in the ISIS series like ISIS Bride of Dracula, ISIS Escape from Transylvania, Night of the Vampires, Wrath of the Cyber Goddess, and other books like the John Haynes series, where I go in depth on the John Haynes character as he's dealing with this whole situation. You can pick up all those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find them at other online booksellers like Draft the Digital, Google Play, Barnes & Noble, and big box retailers like Walmart and Target. And if you'd like to see me make more videos taking the Cream of Wheat Man to the, well, not really going to, well, any other video where I take somebody to the barbecue, you can drop a donation to the Patreon, the PayPal, or the Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.
Now available in paperback and e-readers, The Temptation of John Haynes. Give in to temptation and pick up this action-packed African-American paranormal romance. Get The Temptation of John Haynes in paperback and e-readers today.
Support black-owned and black-operated digital broadcast media. www.niceradionetwork.com. Nice Radio Network, broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.